the 20th of January 2022.
Prince Harry has threatened the British government with legal action.
Harry and Meghan quit their royal duties. They also, of course, lost their taxpayer-funded police protection.
From news.com.au.
I'm Andrew Bucklow, and I've got news for you. Well, guys, Prince Harry is royally pissed. Yeah, he is livid with the UK government after it decided that it would no longer give him and his family police protection when they're back in London. He's so fired up that he's actually taking legal action against the government to try and get them to change their minds. Now, in this episode, a royal expert will break down the story for us and will also tell us about a security scare that Prince Harry had on home soil last year. And we're also going to be joined by a former bodyguard for members of the royal family who's going to explain how he kept them safe in public.
When you actually set foot outside with the member of the royal family, you are looking for those two elements, what you expect to see and what you don't expect to see. If this is a royal walkabout, you would naturally expect everybody to be happy to see a member of the royal family. Somebody may not be so happy, and that may draw your attention.
Here to run us through all the ins and outs of this story is news.com.au's royal writer Daniela Elsa. Now, Daniela, members of the royal family are guarded by royal protection officers. That used to be the case for Harry and Meghan too. When did they lose that privilege?
Okay, so senior members of the royal family are protected by this specialist unit called the Royalty and Specialist Protection Command. Now, as you said, they look after the royal family, but they also look after dignitaries like the British Prime Minister and his family too. And I think the thing that we all have to keep in mind here is that who does get protection by this specialist unit. You don't just get it because you're royal, just because you're closely related to the Queen. So, for example, Princess Anne escaped a kidnapped attempt in her 20s. She's the hardest working royal, but she doesn't have full-time security. Nor does being a prince or a princess or even an HRH automatically qualify you. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie are looked after by private bodyguards who are actually paid for by their father, Prince Andrew.
Right.
So, it's not quite as straightforward as just, having a title therefore equates to getting security. So back in the day when Harry and Meghan were actually frontline members of the royal family, they were protected by the Royalty and Specialist Protection Unit. And then we get to January 2020 and Megxit. And if you sort of cast your mind back to then, which feels like a very, very long time ago, they initially had sort of proposed this half in, half out model where they would both continue to undertake some duties for the Queen while also earning money. Now, as you might remember, she said, no, you've got to pick, you're in or out. And obviously they chose out, which meant that they were going to become private citizens. And therefore that meant goodbye protection for them. Now, that clearly came as a huge shock to Harry and Meghan.
Absolutely. Here's what they said about losing their security during their bombshell interview with Oprah last year.
On the security element, I never thought that I would have my security removed because I was born into this position. I inherited the risk. So that was a shock to me. That was what completely changed the whole plan.
So that you, as Prince Harry, are going to have your security removed.
Yeah, and I even wrote letters to his family saying, please, it's very clear the protection of me or Archie is not a priority. I accept that. That is fine. Please keep my husband safe. I see the death threats. I see the racist propaganda. Please keep him safe. Please don't pull his security and announce to the world when he and we are most vulnerable. And they said it's just not possible.
Yeah, not happy. Okay, so Harry and Meghan have petitioned the UK government to change their minds and give them back police protection because ultimately it's their call. But their pleas have fallen on deaf ears, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. So what we learned this week was that back in January 2020, when they found out they were losing their offices, they actually offered to pay to keep the same ones. So their argument was they wanted that same standard of protection, but they didn't expect the British taxpayer to foot the bill. Now, that request was knocked back by the Metropolitan Police, and it's that decision that Harry is now fighting to have reviewed and reassessed. Now, obviously, Harry and Meghan haven't been without bodyguards the last couple of years. If you look at any of the photos of them in the US or when they were in New York, there are these huge burly men who surround them at all times. But what Harry's arguing is that when he's back in the UK, he needs those specialist officers for two reasons, which are, A, that they have access to certain intelligence that hired bodyguards don't. And there's also, just to keep in mind here, those specialist officers can carry guns, which hired bodyguards cannot. And, look, one of the things that Harry revealed in this paperwork that's come out as part of this review is that In July last year, he was back in the UK for that unveiling of the statue of his mother, of Diana. He says he was chased by photographers and, quote, his security was compromised. His argument is that it's dangerous. It's too dangerous for him to go back and to take his young family back to the UK if he doesn't have access to these specialist officers to really guarantee his safety.
Right, so he's saying he won't bring Meghan and the kids back to the UK without police protection.
Yep, that's exactly it. So the story came out of the weekend. A legal representative for Harry put out a statement, and one of the things he said was, and I quote, "In the absence of such protection, Prince Harry and his family are unable to return to his home." And, you know, that's obviously a really sad situation because, you know, Archie is now, you know, he turns 3 this year. It's been more than 2 years since he's been in the UK. The Sussexes had their little girl Lilibet last year, who was obviously named after her great-grandmother, the Queen. You know, she's 7 and 8 months old. She's never met any of her UK relatives. And this is a really big year for the royal family as an actual family. In April, there is a memorial service planned for Prince Philip at Westminster Abbey. Harry's reportedly keen to attend. Then in June, we get to the big celebrations for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There'll be a number of family events or events that the family will attend. So another church service, Trooping the Colour, a few things like that. And Harry and Meghan have sort of, it's looked like they are keen to go. But whether this situation with their bodyguards and with security throws a spanner in the works, we'll just have to wait and see.
So where to from here for this battle about whether or not he's going to get protection back?
Well, it's a tricky situation. One thing we do know is that Harry and Meghan are not the sorts to back down on legal matters or sort of instances where they feel they're in the right. But that said, you know, since this news broke, there's been no indication that the Met are dramatically rethinking their decision. Look, of course they might. The argument from opponents to Harry and Meghan being given paid access to these officers is that, you know, renting Metropolitan Police officers sort of sets up a dangerous precedent. So, for example, if they're allowed to hire British police for personal reasons, then what is to stop, say, someone like a Bill Gates demanding exactly the same thing? But look, if this does end up going to court, it would be a historic first because never before has a member of the Queen's family really faced off with government ministers. So it would be a really sort of awkward situation for her if that did come to pass. So there's certainly, it'll be interesting to see where things go from here, but I think there'll be more drama ahead.
Simon Morgan was part of the UK Police's personal protection branch for 6 years. He now has his own security company called Trojan Consultancy. Simon, during your time as a Royal Protection Officer, who are some of the royals you got to look after?
I was fortunate enough to work with the whole of the family, from the Queen kind of all the way through kind of the Prince of Wales and kind of both young princes as they were in my time, all the way through to the York princesses. So the broad spectrum of the British royal family.
And what were some of the big events that you got to work on during your time as a Royal Protection Officer?
I mean, you know, all of them, for want of a better word. You know, the royal calendar is something that is, you know, a full-on 12-month calendar of engagements. So, you know, you have the Trooping of the Colour, you have the Festival of Remembrance, you have various other events that kind of take place throughout the year. You have things such as Wales Week, Scotland Week or Holyrood Week, whereby the royal family will go up to Scotland and kind of work up there. So, you know, all the way down to private events that they will kind of take place in. So it's quite a mixed bag, really. You know, so yes, you know, we've done some of the big events. You know, some of the once-in-a-lifetime events for me were the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge's wedding in 2011. Yeah, that was most probably the biggest royal event that I was involved in as a protection officer. As a police officer, the biggest event for me was the Queen Mother's funeral. That was, you know, a very large state event at the time.
What exactly does the job of a Royal Protection Officer entail? Because I'm sure there are quite a few elements to it.
Yes, indeed, very much so. I mean, if you take the kind of the book's definition, then ultimately you are there to preserve life. That is what a protection officer's job is there to do. You are the final line of defence to look after your principal. So, you know, that is the kind of the book version. With regards to your day-to-day role, then it's actually kind of quite varied. You are responsible for their security. You are part of a wider policing plan that will go into place. And also you're part of a wider events plan that will also go into place. So you become a little bit of a pseudo events coordinator to a certain extent, because obviously security has that overriding fixture in any kind of event. So, lots of event organisers look to you and say, how should we do it? How do you think it should be done? Sometimes that's based on protocol as well, because obviously that's kind of quite important with the royal family as well. So the role of a protection officer is kind of quite varied. Whilst you are trained in many different physical and hard skill sets, such as driving, firearms and armed combat, most of the time, 90% of the time, you will be talking to people, communicating, negotiating, seeking compromise. Yeah, communication is most probably the biggest skill that you will actually use.
Do Royal Protection Officers carry guns?
In the UK, Royalty Protection Officers are armed, yes. That is kind of part of their role. That is a tactical option that they have, as well as other options as well, including kind of batons, tasers, CS spray, unarmed combat. It's a series of tactical options that you have kind of here in the UK.
Now, whenever I watch movies with the Secret Service, they always seem to have a code name for the politicians and the members of their family. Does each member of the royal family have a code name?
No, not really. No, they're identified very much by their kind of title and their kind of role. So you're working with the Prince of Wales or you're working with Her Majesty the Queen. So, that's kind of pretty much it. And
are you trained to take a bullet for a royal if you're out in the public and someone launches an attack?
I mean, that is most probably a very kind of Hollywood perspective kind of it. With regards to your core competencies as a protection officer, your role is to provide, there's 4 core competencies. Basically, you react spontaneously, you provide effective body cover, and you neutralise the threat and have consideration for your principals. Those are the 4 core competencies of a protection officer. Now, yes, that's always a question. Are you trained to take the bullet? Are you prepared to take the bullet? Is probably another way of looking at it. But certainly as a protection officer, you are looking not even to get to that point. There will be various things that you should be looking for and kind of working towards that really it shouldn't get to that close quarter combat situation.
I'm chatting to Simon Morgan, a former bodyguard for members of the royal family. Simon, royals spend so much time meeting the public. I believe it's called a walkabout, where they walk up to the rope line and shake hands with well-wishers at different types of events. Are those quite risky?
Yeah, very much so, because you're taking your protected principle and putting them very much in the public domain. Yes, there's a wider policing plan that kind of goes into that. And you are the last line of defence as the protection officer. However, this is something that certainly the royal family and your principal wants to do. So therefore, you have to put a plan in place and you have to put mitigation in place to allow them to do that. Yes, it is most probably the most riskiest part of your job. It is something that you feel the pressure when you're doing it, because, it is all down to you. From your perspective, you have to get it right every day. A bad guy only has to get it right once. So in an ideal world, it would be great to put your principal, a senior member of the royal family in this case, constantly behind the wire and not let them integrate with society, not let them go and meet the public, not let them do anything outside of that wire. But obviously that's not realistic. So therefore you are putting things in place to allow them to go and do such things as meet the public.
So from your point of view, if they're doing a walkabout and you're guarding them, what are you looking for in the crowd?
Okay, I mean, you're looking for what you expect to see and what you don't expect to see. A lot of our time is spent planning events. A lot of our time is spent in reconnaissance for events. And a lot of our time is spent going in advance of events to see what the environment looks like. Is it still what you planned for? Looking at the people that are within that event. And then when you actually set foot outside with the member of the royal family, you are looking for those two elements, what you expect to see and what you don't expect to see. If this is a royal walkabout, you would naturally expect everybody to be happy to see a member of the royal family. Somebody may not be so happy, and that may draw your attention. You would then possibly go and speak to them or engage with them or ask another member of the policing plan to go and speak to them to ascertain, actually, are they there to do us any harm? Or actually, this is somebody who potentially is blind and they can't actually see when the member of the royal family is coming, and somebody will tell them. So that's why they haven't been as excited. Or indeed, it could be somebody that wishes to do you harm. That's why they're not partaking in the excitement of the event. So it's kind of quite a mixed bag of what you're looking at.
And do any of the royals have any signals for their security team to indicate that they're uncomfortable in a certain environment?
Well, again, you're working with them so much. The royal family have cradle-to-grave protection. So, in fact, when I joined Royalty Protection in 2007, you're going into a very much a well-oiled machine, not in terms of the police officers that you work with, but actually members of the royal family who have been used to protection for many, many years. They understand what it's all about. They understand how it works, and they see the value in what it does. So, you are looking to them if they're not happy with regards to somebody talking to them or something that is said. You are looking at that body language to see whether, it is kind of working for them or not, as much as they're looking for it for you as well. If you're clearly not happy with something, then, they will kind of walk around you. They wouldn't necessarily kind of come towards you. So, you do really build up a rapport, and that rapport is built on trust. And to a certain extent, it is a partnership that you form with your principal.
Have you had any close calls during your security career?
I mean, fortunately not. And again, what do you kind of class, as a close call? From my perspective, there was no time that we had to draw firearms or kind of discharge your weapon or anything like that. Sometimes you've got into a kind of a tight space whereby barriers have been removed or something like that, or, even a drama of a car breaking down, those kind of things. Fortunately, because of the planning that goes into it and the experience of the officers concerned, you don't get many difficult situations when you're out working.
Prince Harry is currently fighting the UK government for police protection. Now, some people might say he should just beef up his private security. In your opinion, could private security ever protect him in the UK as well as royal protection officers?
I mean, that is quite a subjective question because you need to kind of go back and have a look at the threat and risk. So, at the moment, Prince Harry currently has a privately funded security team in the US. He feels that he would be better served if he ever came to the UK to have police protection. Now, for that, you need to understand what the threat and risk is. There is a generic risk around the royal family, and certainly at times there is a specific risk. If you look at Harry in particular, yes, he's sixth in line to the throne. He's also an ex-member of Her Majesty's Forces, has served 2 tours of Afghanistan. So therefore, at certain times, that generic threat will become a specific threat. So, you need to understand at the moment, is it a case of an actual threat, or is it just a perceived threat? Does he feel that he would be better served with armed protection officers? Obviously, his protection officers coming in from the US were not allowed to be armed.
Right.
There's far more questions that need answering rather than a straightforward black and white answer of should he have it or shouldn't he have it.
After being a royal protection officer, you started a private security firm called Trojan Consultancy. I hear you've worked some pretty big names at that company.
Yeah, we have. We've been very fortunate. I mean, we took the skill set that we learned and had from the royal family, and now we kind of use that in the private sector. We say we look after people of wealth, visibility and status, and that does put us, right back to a certain extent at working with people of a similar aura, of a similar position. We've done some kind of good events. We've done the Bond premieres over the last couple of years. We did the Game of Thrones wedding for Kit Harington and Rose Leslie a couple of years ago. We are fortunate that we work for some some very good people, but it's only because of what we previously did and gained that skill set and that experience that affords us to do that now.
Simon Morgan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to I've Got News for You.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, personally, I feel like Harry and Meghan should be entitled to police protection when they're in the UK. I think it's only fair. I wanted to find out if I was in the majority or minority with that opinion, so I asked some people on the streets. Here's what they had to say. What do you think? Should they be entitled to police protection in the UK?
Well, there are some pretty crazy people out there, so, you never know what might happen. I reckon cops is a good idea.
No, I don't think he should get protection because he left the royal family and he left all of that behind.
I absolutely do agree that they should get police protection when they're in the UK. You only have to look at what happened to his mother. We don't want history repeating itself. They're a high-profile couple. They have 2 young children. Security is of utmost importance. If anything were to happen, whose fault is that?
What do you think? Should they be entitled to police protection in the UK?
No, absolutely not. I think they're probably looking at using their position to get such an outcome that's not available to the ordinary citizen that feel that they're under threat if they go to that country. So the answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, no, I definitely think he should be getting protection. I mean, it wasn't Harry's choice to be born into the royal family. Although his status has changed, he's still at risk of threat when he's in the UK. He's born into a family that is at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I think Harry and Meghan should be entitled to police protection, sure, as long as they pay for it.
We'll keep you up to date on Harry's legal case against the UK government on news.com.au. That's all we've got time for in today's episode. I'll chat to you again tomorrow.